You are now watching Zach Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be continuing on our video uploads of early deck lists. Fusion Strike is very close to being released, if not released at the time of this video, and I'm sure many of you have been playing in official and unofficial pre-release events. We're going to be covering my physical copy of Chandelure VMAX, not necessarily the most competitive deck out of the set, but certainly an interesting one, and I'm sure some of you pulled Chandelure VMAX and you're like, how could we make this competitively viable? Not all the content on my channel is going to be the most competitive or anything else like that, so this one's really more about me showing what a Chandelure VMAX deck could look like, and not necessarily worrying if it's the best deck in the world. I think that Chandelure is interesting at the very least, so I'm really excited to show you exactly what this is and test my whole new top-down perspective. I recently mounted a webcam into my setup, and that's why we have all this cool setup. I've just been working on my office space, so hopefully you enjoy this video. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That being said, let's jump into this awesome deck list. So Chandelure VMAX is a deck that not a lot of players have necessarily thought of or have been willing to think of, but I try to make content regarding around each VMAX or each Pokemon that I think is at least interesting, just so everyone has an idea of what is going on. So I'm going to start off with 3 copies of the Chandelure VMAX. Chandelure VMAX has an ability, Curse Shimmer. As long as this Pokemon is the active spot, your opponent can't play any Pokemon tool cards from their hands. I don't necessarily think that ability is going to work great in this deck, nor do I think it's going to do a lot of things for this particular deck. We're really looking at it for its max Poltergeist attack. So for Fire Colorless, you could totally do 70 times the amount of trainers in your opponent's hands. They reveal their hands, and I mean, if you catch them at the right time, you're going to be dealing a massive amount of damage. Now, if your opponent's smart, they're going to play around it. This deck plays as many ways as we possibly can to increase the amount of trainers they have in their hand. There's not very many options, but I've searched through as many as I possibly could and have added them into this deck. We've seen attacks like Poltergeist on many Pokemon in the past, and it's one of those things where I think it's just a decent enough attack to build a deck around. This is a great deck to bring to League or to maybe give to a new player or something like that, because it does teach them how to play differently with strategies. So we have 3 copies of the Chandelure VMAX. We have 4 copies of Chandelure V. I think Chandelure V is really more or less a means to evolve in the Chandelure VMAX. It has Confuse Ray, so you can confuse your opponent's active Pokemon for a single fire. I mean, I think that seems okay. You also have another Poltergeist attack. So the same attack, but doing 40 damage. I think it's cool. Not necessarily as much damage, but it could be a way to hit into something. I decided to go with an Inteleon line for this deck, so we're going to be playing the Quick Shooting Inteleon and the Shady Dealings Inteleon when it comes to this deck. The reason why we're playing both is because the damage output of Max Poltergeist is a little bit low, so we could do the Quick Shooting, and of course if you're building any Inteleon engine, why not include one of the Shady Dealings Inteleon. We also have the 4 copies of Drizzile that's going to allow us to quickly search for any of the cards we need in our deck. Some of the few ways that we have to increase our opponent's hand size or to change their hand up is playing Marnie. We could force them into getting some new cards, or we could play the new copy of Judge, which allows both players to shuffle their hands to their deck and draw 4 cards. So we have ways to use Drizzile effectively. I do think the 70 HP Sobble makes the most sense in this deck because we are not playing Rapid Strike Pokemon. Chandelure is just a normal Pokemon. And we don't necessarily have a way to self-accelerate energies like other decks. So we really need the energy on the Chandelure V to evolve into a Chandelure VMAX. That's why the 70 HP Sobble is better. You're just going to gain the extra HP. We have 1 copy of Crobat V for good measure. I think that's just a good way for us to draw some cards. A lot of decks just play Crobat V, so why not play Crobat V for us to draw some cards? So speaking of Marnie, like I said, these are the ways that we have to kind of force our opponent into drawing some extra cards. If they are playing around Max Poltergeist, we have ways to look in their hand with this deck. I don't want to go through any surprises yet or spoil anything, but we could use that and then play Marnie and decide how much damage we're doing with Max Poltergeist. Remember, we're not trying to get a one-shot with Max Poltergeist. That'd be really nice, and you can use it after your opponent draws any prize cards in order to hit for the max amount of damage. Maybe they drew 3 prize cards and they drew 3 trainers, but we should be able to two-shot most things. So if they have 3 cards in their hands, we should be able to two-shot most things. If they have 4 trainers in their hand, we could usually finish them off with Inteleon with quick shooting. So as much as Max Poltergeist doesn't seem like a lot, there are some cool things going on here. We have 2 copies of Professor's Research. This just seems like a good way for us to draw some cards. Most decks play Professor's Research. We do have the Shady Dealings Inteleon engine, so we can kind of search out trainers as we wish. Maybe Research is just a better trainer for us to play sometimes than playing Marnie, especially if we think that we're just going to hit them with Max Poltergeist or whatever. We have a couple copies of Boss's Orders. We could bring up Pokemon that might have less HP, or something we might know how many trainers they have, because we can always remember the cards that they played for Max Poltergeist the last turn as well. Maybe they didn't necessarily play all their trainers, or they're holding on to them, or they have too many. We could boss something up, especially if we hit them with Max Poltergeist the first time. We've got a couple copies of Judge here. So Judge allows us to shuffle both of our hands into our decks, both our opponents and ourselves, and we both draw 4 cards. So maybe our opponent already knows what's going on with Marnie or something like that. We have a way to kind of shuffle it into their deck and give them a random chance, especially if they've been preparing their deck with Marnie, if that makes sense. Maybe they have something that knows the order, or we've played enough Marnies that they're not changing the order, or we can look at the top cards of our opponent's deck with one of the cards. In here, again, no spoilers. We got a copy of Raihan. The Raihan's going to allow us to attack with Max Poltergeist if we have no energies, if one of our Pokemon is knocked out. So it's just an easy search with Drizzile, Shady Dealings, Raihan, attach energy from our discard pile, build this up in 1 turn. Any 2 energy VMAX decks should be playing a copy of Raihan, or at least have a reason to or a reason not to. We have 2 copies of Path to the Peak. I think Path to the Peak is just a decent stadium. I mean, our ability doesn't really matter too much. We only have the Dark Asset. Be careful with Dark Asset and Path to the Peak. But it is one of those things where we could totally kind of just play around with shutting our opponent off. Maybe they play Path to the Peak as well, and they might not necessarily be able to play them down from their hands. Maybe that's the next kind of iteration of this deck, where we choose popular stadiums of what we struggle with in our matchups, or maybe we're struggling to hit numbers. So let's say it's Shadow Rider, for example, that usually plays Training Court. We can put Training Courts in this deck so they can't play their Training Courts down, or their extra copies can't get played down. We have 4 copies of Quick Ball. Quick Ball is pretty self-explanatory. We're just really trying to get out our basic Pokemon. Sobbles are important. Chandelures are important. We have 4 copies of Evolution Incense. I think Evolution Incense, again, really self-explanatory. We're looking for Drizziles, Inteleon, Chandelure VMAX. We don't have too many ways to search out Pokemon in this format. We have 4 copies of Level Ball. I think the 4 copies here work great. Again, we want to be searching out Sobbles, Drizziles. Most things can search out 2 things. And this is really the spice card that I found. We have 3 copies of Drone Rotom. I often contemplate adding in a 4th, because we could look at our opponent's hands. And then we could look at their top card of their deck. So now we can decide if it's better to use Marnie, because we know one of the cards they're going to draw into if it's a trainer, or we could play Judge if it's not a trainer, and maybe shuffle it and give them a higher chance of getting a trainer card. So we have some cool ways to play around with the limited Max Poltergeist options that we have in this format. Again, a 4th Drone Rotom might work well. It's one of those things where, if you ask me how to build a Chandelure deck off the top of my head, this is really one of my early drafts, and that's why it's part of the early deck list kind of series. It's not necessarily the most best deck in the entire world or the most play-tested deck. These are decks that I've come up with to give you a really strong skeleton after playing Pokemon. Like, I've been playing Pokemon since 2005. I know how to build a solid deck, or at least I hope so. We've got a couple copies of Energy Search. I just think attaching an energy is really good, especially in a 2 energy deck. A lot of decks that play Inteleon have like Fog Crystal for your Dragapult deck, or Leafeon has a way to accelerate energies. I think this deck needs a couple Energy Search. I think 2 is the correct number. Maybe it could go down to 1, and that could be a Drone Rotom spot. And I have a copy of Escape Rope here as well. I just think in terms of having a switching card, the Chandelure VMAX has 2 retreats. I think playing 1 Escape Rope seems fine. And Scoop Up Net's another way to kind of retreat out of the Inteleons, or retreat in air tags or air quotes, and maybe reutilize a quick shooting or an Shady Dealings, or even just got a Sobble out of the active spot. That's what we got for trainers. We have some energies here. Just make it look pretty. I like spreading out deck lists. It's kind of really calming for me. So we got 5 fire energies. I think that 5 fire energies is probably just the appropriate amount when it comes to a deck like this to search things out. We have Energy Search. We just want to attach one on our first turn. And we have 4 copies of Capture Energy, because again, this takes fire colorless, so we can get the benefit of the colorless and search for things like Sobbles or another Chandelure. Overall, I mean, I think it seems like a pretty fun deck to play. Again, not really the most competitive deck because your opponent can totally play around Max Poltergeist. But you want to know what? In terms of getting 2 shots with Max Poltergeist, or hitting things like Genesect V for weakness, or Leafeon VMAX for weakness, or even Turbo Zacian for weakness, you have a lot of cool things that you can do as a fire type deck. I think your opponent might just draw in some prize cards, be like, okay, we got a Boss, we got a Marnie, we got a Quick Ball. That's 210 damage, like 70 damage times adds up a lot. And if Gengar Mimikyu really showed us anything about this game, sometimes a quick Poltergeist can really just like destroy things. So try to keep that in mind when it comes to playing this deck. Like its damage output's going to be weird, but it might not be terrible. And I don't want to be like, hey guys, here's an awesome deck, or hey peeps, here's this awesome deck. It might not be terrible, but I mean, it's a little bit random, a little bit like you could decide things with Drone Rotom and Judge and Marnie. So you have some cool pivot points. If they ever add anything else into the format that could add items back into your opponent's hand, I could totally see this deck being viable. Maybe Inteleon's not the best way to go about this deck. I think most decks that are VMAX just kind of add Inteleon into it, especially since it's not really ability based. So overall, I think it's a sweet deck, and I recommend giving it a whirl. Don't invest too much into this deck because I don't think it's necessarily like tier 1 like Inteleon VMAX or anything else from Fusion Strike, but I certainly think it's a cool deck to have built, test, and maybe even if you're a newer player at the league, learn the ropes of the game from a rogue aspect. Well, that's what we got going on for this video today, peeps. Hopefully I could add a new light to Chandelure VMAX. I mean, it is a chandelier, so adding light to it, haha, pun, I know, literally. Don't downvote the video over that. Be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel. The list is in the description, so be sure to give it a try. I mean, it's a cool deck, and I just try to showcase decks that I think are unique, or maybe something that someone just pulled something from a pre-release or a build and battle box, and they're like, yo, how do I build Chandelure VMAX? This is the video for you. And if it's not the video for you, that's cool. There's a lot of other great content on my channel as well. That being said, I'm going to go edit this video, and I'll catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great day. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video and have yourself a great day. Thanks.